Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of The Push with Nick and KP. I am Nick, of course, joined here by KP. Today, we are going to do something a little different. Typically, we do the recaps, and that's fun and all, but doesn't give us much room for creativity. So, today's video, we will be going over now that we know all six participants in the Elimination Chamber for 2025, we're going to basically go through each of them, discuss what we would do with them if they were to win, and which champion they would go after, and how likely we think they are to win. The one disclaimer here, because we're already doing a bit of fantasy booking, so to speak. So we figured why not go the whole way. So one disclaimer here is that we are pretending that Gunther and Tiffy have not yet been challenged. So just for the sake of the video and for the sake of discussions, um, we're gonna discuss a little more in detail on which champion we think they should have faced. All right. So without further ado, we will get started here with the women's elimination chamber match. We will start with Alexa. KP, please share your thoughts with us on Alexa and what you would do with her if she were to win the Elimination Chamber next Saturday.
Okay, so Alexa Bliss. Obviously, like we say, this is going to be very much a fantasy thing. We're, thinking that it could be either option here, really, at the end of this one. And that is basically why I'm saying that, because I think, ultimately speaking, herself and Rhea Ripley, I think, is an interesting sounding matchup to me. But if I was to be like booking Alexa as the winner of this chamber, with any option available to her, I would book her against Tiffany Stratton. I think that an Alexa Bliss Tiffany Stratton match could be quite the interesting build towards it. Alexa having only recently come back, so I feel like she's just getting back into the swing of things. And Tiffany Stratton, who is like on basically on this like upward spiral, just really sort of like impressing everybody as she goes along. Obviously, winning the championship pretty recently. Back start of the year, back end of last year. It was just the start of the year, actually, wasn't it? I think. But yeah, we haven't seen too much of her in that title position. I don't think anybody realistically expects Alexa Bliss to win a championship so soon after returning after 2 years out. I think that Alexa and Tiff would be able to deliver something that we haven't really seen before. We got this interesting side of Alexa Bliss since coming back. She's shown a little bit of sort of, I don't know about like cockiness, but maybe a little bit sort of like assertive, perhaps towards the other women. We've seen she's very like proud of how she's handling herself backstage, and maybe a little bit sort of like fun little mind games as well, perhaps, that she's playing. But it's sort of like in like a positive manner, which is kind of strange. It's quite interesting to imagine, but that seems to be how she's been doing it so far. You got someone like Tiffany Stratton. I feel like the two could really gel and work together quite well and generate something quite interesting going into WrestleMania. So yeah, I think if it was me personally, I would book Alexa Bliss to go up against Tiffany Stratton, given that would be an option available at the time. But yeah, I think if you were to look at Alexa and Rhea, that wouldn't be a terrible match either. Rhea can go with basically anybody. I think the two have had like little bits of things in the past before, not an awful lot, but bits here and there. I think more so in the tag team division, if I want to say correctly, back then. But no, yeah, I would go Tiffany Stratton. What about you though, Nick? What are your thoughts on this one? Does the thought of an Alexa Rhea match, tickle your fancy, or are you thinking the same lines as me?
Yeah, I think for this one, I think it kind of limbos in the fact that we don't 100% quite know what her character, like kind of what direction her character is going. So with that being said, if she was going in like the Twisted Bliss, kind of the bratty Alexa, which we've seen her do that before. I think if she were to go that route, I think her matchup would be better with Tiffany Stratton, just because they're kind of the character dynamics are kind of similar, and so just seeing that play out, I think would be kind of interesting. But and I think we saw this in her interview, the last time she was on screen, where we saw kind of the old Wyatt Six screen disruption come on when she was interviewing. So assuming that's the route she's going back to you know, that character with the Wyatt Six and the kind of darker angle, I think that would actually go really well with Rhea. Um, but again, I think you could make the case for both. But if I had to choose, I think her going up against Rhea with the Wyatt Six persona and all of the creepy, spooky stuff behind that, think that would be a really interesting dynamic with Rhea. So if I had to choose going on that, I would go with Rhea. But yeah, I don't think either match would be bad. But as you mentioned, I don't think that her chances of winning are very high, simply because of her just returning. We don't know a ton about her character yet, so I think she has loads of character work to do to kind of get us back in the swing of things. And she's only had one match, a single match. Obviously, we know the one-on-one match is much different than the Rumble appearance. So, but yeah, and she looked, even in that match, she looked a little different. So I just don't think it's in the cards for her yet. But we'll talk about that a little more with the rating and the likeliness of each woman participating here. So with that, we will go on to the next woman, and alphabetical order would be Bailey. Um, so KP, are you thinking Bailey could potentially win here? And if so, who would you book her to go after?
In terms of like thinking whether she has a reasonable chance of winning, I would say personally, no, I don't think so. I think she's just come off of the back of a lot of championship sort of pictures on Friday Night SmackDown. Obviously, now having been transferred over to Monday Night Raw, the landscape's completely different for her. New challenges, new opportunities, whatnot. But yeah, I think I don't think she would have Elimination Chamber winner's arc in her near future, because that would obviously spiral her up to a potential going from there. For the purpose of fantasy booking, obviously, in this case, it would be either Tiffany Stratton or Rhea Ripley. I wouldn't put her back in against Tiffany Stratton. We've already seen that match pretty recently. Tiffany getting the win in that one. I think that would be our last match on SmackDown, actually, for Bailey, before being traded over officially. So, yeah, I think this one's quite an easy one for me. I'd go Rhea Ripley. Bailey against Rhea, have we seen that in recent times? I feel like that's probably happened at some point, but I'm struggling to remember a match between the two of them. I feel like they've always been in like separate situations, separate brands, whatnot. So they've had a bit of distance between the two of them. But yeah, in terms of like haven't seen that in a while, I think it's very very different. These two characters since probably the last time they did meet a while back. So yeah, I would go with Bailey and Rhea Ripley 100% if Bailey were to win the Elimination Chamber, and I would like to see that contest. Like I said, completely different the two have been probably since the last meeting, so it just makes more sense to me. But yeah, Tiffany Stratton, she's obviously got a history with Bailey. That's all said and done. So something new, something fresh. That would be my booking for the role model. What about you though, Nick? Do you think the same thing as me, or are you maybe looking for a bit more of a Bailey and Tiffany Stratton?
For whatever it's worth, I just Google searched Rhea and Bailey, and the first thing that came up was March 20th, 2023. So if that is the case, it has been a minute since Rhea has faced Bailey. That being said, I completely agree with you. While I think Bailey is probably the most deserving of everyone in this match, obviously I don't think that running it back with Tiffy would really be there in terms of just doesn't feel like it would be interesting to me personally, um, especially with her being a face and to go after the heel when she lost. Um, I don't know. It didn't. It just doesn't feel like it's been put up anyways. Um, but that being said, I too think Rhea would be the right choice. If it's been that long since they just had a match and that looks to be on Raw, I don't think we've ever seen them on a PLE. And don't quote me on that, but I don't recall them having a match on a PLE one on one. We've seen what Rhea was able to do with Charlotte, so just thinking about what she could do with Bailey is just as enticing to me personally. So yeah, I think I would have her go after Rhea, and just the story behind it just being, you want to prove you're one of the best, prove it now, and you having Rhea prove that she's going to be one of the next big, if she's not already, I guess, one of the next big women in WWE. You solidify your status by beating me, I suppose. But yeah, I don't think that needs a big story. Just Bailey versus Rhea, I think, kind of sells itself, in my opinion. So next, speaking of most deserving, and I feel like two of these women, and Bianca and Bailey, have certainly above the remaining four, especially on a main roster standpoint. Um, Bailey and Bianca have both had their fair share of titles, and most recently, obviously, Alexa has had her fair share of titles as well, but not recently. So move on to Bianca from here. Um, I think this one will be another obvious choice, but what would you go with if Bianca were to win the Elimination Chamber next Saturday?
Yeah, this one is a pretty easy one for me. I think that Bianca and Tiff doesn't quite tick the box for me in comparison to Bianca and Rhea Ripley does. I think that Bianca's had some really big WrestleMania matches. You can talk the likes of Asuka, you can talk the likes of Sasha Banks in the past, and she's been involved in the mix like some very big matches on the grand stage. I think her and Rhea Ripley having a one-on-one contest at Mania would be phenomenal. Genuinely think it would be incredible. So for me personally, I would love to see that match happen. So I think it's quite easy for me really here. Yeah, I don't really have too much more to add on that because it's so like one-sided, my opinion here. But yeah, I guess I'll hypothetically talk about Tiffany Stratton opportunity if it were to take place. I think it would be something that I think would be an idea maybe a bit further down the line, but I think yeah, right now it sort of does get overshadowed by that possible Rhea Ripley Bianca Belair matchup. I think that's just got star power written all over it, and it's got like main event material written on it as well. So yeah, I would quite comfortably say Rhea Ripley here, just because of what the match could possibly bring, and it could be an absolute all timer. It genuinely could be that good. So yeah, I would go with Bianca Belair winning and going to face Rhea Ripley as a very 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 good possibility there. But what about you though, Nick? Is yours quite as one-sided as mine, or have you got maybe a little bit more love the show towards maybe a Bianca Belair Tiffany Stratton contest?
Yeah, I don't really think you can go. I don't think you can go wrong with either of these. To be honest, I think Tiffy and Bianca, in terms of what they could do together in the ring, would certainly be entertaining, and I would have no issues with that. But it's just Rhea's being as dominant for as long as she has. I think you kind of hit it on the head there. The star power with Bianca and Rhea just feels like a Mania match. Um, and not to no slight towards Tiffany Stratton. I just don't think we're quite there yet. But yeah, the only bit that would make that kind of complicated, and I guess you could have said this with the last woman, a few of the other women as well, is Bianca versus Rhea as both faces. Not typically something they do on a Mania stage. So that's the only kind of bit. Um, and am I sitting here saying that Bianca should turn heel? Yes, absolutely. I think that would make the dynamic all the more interesting. But yeah, Bianca, similar to the Bailey versus Rhea, Bianca and Rhea just kind of has star power and Mania match written all over it. So next we move on to Liv Morgan. I think this one will be interesting to hear your take on as well. We've certainly seen a lot of Liv versus Rhea. Some would probably prefer not to see any more of it. But what are your thoughts on Liv Morgan and if she is to win the Elimination Chamber, KP?
Yeah, I mean, you've already hit the nail on the head for me there. I think, I can agree to that. We've seen far too much of Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley. So if Tiff was to be an option, I would go Liv Morgan, Tiffy Stratton every single day of the week. But yeah, that I just don't want to see Liv Morgan and Rhea Ripley again. Like, how many times did we see it last year? Was it 3 times? I want to say. Obviously all in various different scenarios and whatnot. Um, well, actually, 3 times, not just last year, but going into very early this year. So in that whole sort of story between the two of them, their revenge tour going back to Mummy coming back and whatever. Yeah, I think it was about 3 matches in total, but it was yeah, it was a bit of a year-long saga. It felt like. So I think it's fair to say that that part of the story for me is done personally, and a match between Liv Morgan and Tiffany Stratton is way more enticing to me right now, and something that I would much rather see for definite. I am assuming you think the same thing, and you would rather have Liv against Tiff as well.
So I will throw in one particular interesting bit. If Liv going up against Rhea was an option, I feel like they could make it work under the caveat that they switched roles, basically pulling a Bret and Stone Cold, if you will, doing the double turn. I think that could be interesting. I think Rhea going full ballistic on Liv would be interesting in the build up to Mania. That being said, I'm not entirely sure it would work simply because of the absolute hatred we have for Liv's partner in Dom. So I'm not sure that would even work. But I think if you had to go that route, I think you could potentially twist it that way. That being said, yeah, I think Tiffany would be the right choice as well. The dynamic between Tiffy and Dom, I think honestly that holds more than the Liv versus Tiffy bit. I think in ring would be, nothing crazy. I just don't feel like Liv and Tiffy in ring would merge very well together. But yeah, Tiffany and Dominic, that dynamic between them, I think would be all time. I think, and even to throw in another, how Dom like would it be for Dom to basically pull what he did to Rhea and do that to Liv and kind of join Tiffany's side. I think that would be a great moment, and whether it be a bit repetitive, would be great to see Liv kind of get hers finally on the grandest stage of them all. So with that, we move on to Naomi. How are you feeling about a Naomi win, Elimination Chamber, and who would you book her against, KP?
How am I feeling about a Naomi win? I'm not feeling it. I guess I could I guess I could point blank just say straight up. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't I wouldn't say that I'm hoping she wins. So yeah, I don't want to go like put too much of a dampener on that, but yeah, I think out of everybody in this match, she's one of the least favorable options for me to win this contest. Not to say that she doesn't deserve it or anything, but I think given her current status with the Women's Tag Team Championships, I think that honor the gold that you've got before looking for others. I think personally speaking, but hey, let's say for example Naomi does win the Elimination Chamber, and she would be able to choose her champion to go up against. I think that her and Tiffany Stratton, they've had a little bit of a history recently on SmackDown. With obviously the whole Nia stuff, and I think that maybe I'd rather see her go on to a different route. So I think Naomi and Rhea Ripley would be a very interesting match. Not something I thought I'd ever maybe contemplate maybe seeing at WrestleMania, but in terms of the what's going on right here right now, I think that yeah, I'd rather have that be the option personally. So yeah, Naomi and Rhea Ripley, that's what I would choose if it was what I was going for. Because, like I said, she got that little bit of history with Tiffany Stratton. Let's mix things up. Let's go something a little bit different. That's what I would personally do. What about you though? Are you looking up at the WrestleMania sign, thinking, "Wow, Naomi and Rhea Ripley or Tiffany Stratton, that could be a good option," or maybe are you thinking, "Nah, not for me."
Well, as you know, I am not a huge Naomi fan. Just style doesn't really mesh well with me. That being said, and kind of a caveat or kind of a continuing on to that, Naomi's style of wrestling just doesn't feel like it would go well up against Rhea. Um, you know, something about it. I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but it's hard for me to put that in words. But it just doesn't feel like that would go well together. So I think the interaction between Naomi and Tiffany could be quite entertaining in terms of outside of the ring and the promos with one another. I think that could be interesting. But you raise a good point about the tag titles, and interesting that neither of us said anything about that with Bianca. Um, and I think personally, I think it's just because, well, yeah, Bianca is bigger than those tag titles. Where personally, I feel like Naomi feels like she's more suited to hold the tag title. So I think that's personally why I didn't have that opinion either. But yeah, I think Naomi and Tiffany, in terms of kind of both having the backgrounds that they do, I think that could make for a pretty interesting match. Um, so yeah, moving on to last but certainly not least, just making waves on the main roster after making history at the Royal Rumble is Roxanne Perez, and what we kind of argued, say argued, kind of talked about thinking this might be her official push up to main. With her not being on NXT this week, that seems like that could very likely be the case. So, what are we thinking if Roxy were to win? What an absolute debut that would be for her after the Mania, or excuse me, the Royal Rumble statement she made um, just recently. KP, how would you book her, and who would you book her against if she were to win the Elimination Chamber?
This is by far probably the most fascinating of the six for me personally, because of Roxanne Perez, she hasn't been around on the main roster too long, like we said. So I think the options for her are really sort of either of the two. I I sort of ummed and ahed about this one when we presented the ideas for this podcast, because realistically, a match between Roxanne Perez and Rhea Ripley sounds great. It really does. I don't see any issues in that whatsoever. I think that, Roxanne's attitude, I think, she can sort of like build herself up to being a credible threat to Rhea Ripley, even in her early stages of being on the main roster. The Royal Rumble performance definitely helps that as well, being the Iron Woman. Um, I think personally, though, after having a lot of thinking about this one, that Roxanne Perez, if she were to win the Chamber and had those options for either or, I would book her against Tiffany Stratton, purely because, and I know we've seen, them having back and forths in NXT before when Tiff was down there. But I just think that for me feels like the right match, if that makes sense. I think like Roxanne Perez and Tiffany Stratton, I thought they can complement each other a lot more than maybe Rhea Ripley and Roxanne Perez could. For some reason in my head, that just makes a bit more sense. And obviously, you might disagree with that one perhaps in a moment. And I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this. But yeah, I just like the idea of Roxanne Perez, Tiffany Stratton, for a women's championship. That to me just sounds great. And maybe call me an NXT nostalgia guy, perhaps, seeing them down there and now both being on the main roster and competing in these big opportunities. Tiffany with the championship. I don't know. Maybe it's just a case of that. But yeah, for me personally, Roxanne Perez, Tiffany Stratton, I think would work really well. They blend together nicely, and yeah, it would be a great contest between the two women as well. But to say take nothing away from Roxanne Perez and Rhea Ripley, that's just what I would personally go for this one. But I'm ultimately just looking forward to seeing Roxy in the chamber to see what she does, and that should be quite the interesting display. Considering how well she's performed since coming onto the main roster. What about you, Nick? What are you thinking here? Are you thinking the same thing as me, or are you actually on the other side and thinking Roxanne Perez, Rhea Ripley sounds too good to miss?
Yeah, I think, and I think a reason it seems like we're choosing Tiffy, it just feels like um, that's a little more believable, just because she's coming on main, getting her main exposure. Um, like we said, what a push it would be for her to make history at the Rumble and then win her very first Elimination Chamber, and then to go on and go up against Rhea, and even if she weren't to beat her, just to make a competitive match with Rhea, that would be what an all-time push that would be. But yes, I do agree with you. I think this is the most interesting participant in the Elimination Chamber, simply because I think interesting here also means fresh, something we haven't seen and want to see. And I think kind of they haven't made it official that she's on the main roster. I think her being in this PLE and competing here, I think kind of does, but they haven't officially said it. Like everyone else gets their grand entrance on, after Mania or what have you. But it hasn't felt like it's quite been official yet. So I think there's a bunch of possibilities and what could be, and what ifs with her. So I think that's what makes her the most interesting, in my opinion. That being said, yeah, I don't think there's a bad choice here, and I feel like with the previous five, it felt like you could come up with a bad choice with most of them. But for this one, I think Roxy could very well make a story with either of them. I think I would lean towards Tiffy, just because I think going up against Rhea and how dominant Rhea's been, going up against her could either prove. I just don't think that could help Rhea. Um, I think that could only hurt Rhea. So I think having her go up against Tiffy, as they're both somewhat fresh to the main roster, I think makes more sense. And but yeah, it's curious. Another point I'd be interested to hear your take on is, either now or once we go into the categorizing in terms of how likely they are to win, is how do you think Roxy will be portrayed on Ming? Will she be portrayed as the baby face? Seems more likely, or do you think she'll carry on her heel persona from NXT? But yeah, with that, I'll get your take on that real quick. And then after that, if you want to go ahead and rank each six competitors in terms of how likely they are to win, six being the least likely and one being the most.
Okay, so just to answer your question there regarding Roxanne Perez, I think if you were to take her and basically just like flip her, I don't know if it's a flip, but like just transition her into that face sort of demeanor. I think you may be removing a little bit of what she's done in the past like year or so on NXT. So for me, I would stick to her as a heel for a while, up until maybe the time is right to maybe make a change down the line. But yeah, for the foreseeable future, stick to her as a heel. 'Cause I think she's done such a great job, and I think like just going back on that wouldn't be the right call for me personally. Um, but yeah, that's what I would personally do regarding that. Going into the ratings of how likely each woman here is to win the Elimination Chamber match, talking like properly down to a T now. I would go with the following. So I sort of like had a bit of a here and there sort of thing regarding this one. I would say my biggest no to win this match would probably be Naomi, purely for the fact that A, she's in the Women's Tag Team champions, picture. Obviously, she is one half of them. And B, I just don't really see a Mania match for her right here in this moment that sort of appeals to me personally. So I would pop her as the sixth most likely. Going up from there, I would then put Bianca Belair next, purely for the fact that A, she is literally in the tag team championship, image again with her partner Naomi. And I also think that Jade Cargill has something to say at some point. She's waiting in the shadows. She's, waiting for maybe a big opportunity. Perhaps that could be this match here now. I don't know. We wanted her at the Royal Rumble. She didn't appear. Maybe that happens again. Who knows? But I think they can't leave it too long. I would imagine Jade will show her face at some point, and I think there's something bigger than a title picture for Bianca Belair in the future. So I'd put Bianca fifth here. Going up to the next one, I'd say perhaps would be Bayley, purely for the fact that as I mentioned a moment ago, she's been over on SmackDown, in that main title picture, and she's come off the back of that, transitioned over to Raw. I just don't think putting her back into the title picture straight away on a different roster is really what we should be doing here. So I would pop her in that fourth position for most likely. Going into third, and I can't believe, removing, three seasoned veterans of, the main roster. We've then got, the upstart, the new one coming in here to the main roster from NXT. Roxanne Perez, I would put as my third most likely to win here. Do I think it's possible? Well, maybe. But I still am thinking, probably not. I can't really see that happening. So, yeah, I think it's maybe a bit too early for Roxy. But in terms of her ability, her quality, she's got that in spades. She's the prodigy for a reason after all. But yeah, maybe a little bit too early for her just to win an Elimination Chamber match, to go to WrestleMania in a big time contest. So that's why I'm putting her third. Second for me here will be Alexa Bliss. I think that she is a very big possibility to win the Elimination Chamber. Obviously coming back recently and being in that mix of, is she a face? Is she a heel? Is she sort of like completely detached away from the Wyatts? There's obviously that overlooming question as well. I think that she is the second most likely to win this one, purely for the amount of speculation, not really knowing too much about what she's going to be going through in her main roster time, since coming back. So that's why I'm putting her second, purely for the doubts in my mind. The most likely person that does leave one, and that's Liv Morgan, is because it just seems to me that they're not quite done with Liv and Rhea yet. I don't know what it is in me that says it, but I feel like the next chapter is about to come up. And going into WrestleMania, I feel like that chapter will end then. I just think that's the way it's going to be. I think Liv is probably the most likely to win it. She's my favorite to win this Chamber match. And she's not my like personal favorite. Like I would rather have somebody else win. As I've mentioned, I don't want to see her against Rhea Ripley again, but I just think she is the most likely to win. That's what I would go with. What about you though, Nick? Anything different to me? Same order somehow? or some differences in there somewhere? What about yeah, what you're thinking then?
It would make for an interesting video had we come up with the exact same ratings. Um, but yeah, so this is tough. I feel like the men's has a little more obvious winner coming out of it. Whereas the women, I wouldn't be shocked if outside of Roxy, just because she just came up, but outside of that, like I wouldn't be shocked if any of these six women were to win. One overlying underlying issue with all of these are though, five of the six have been in some sort of feud with each other, building up to this. You have the tag titles, and then you have Liv, who's been Liv has been with Raquel. So you have that dynamic. And then you have Bailey and Roxy, who just had a PLE match at Vengeance Day in NXT. So clearly that's going to come into play. It's just a matter of how and what WWE wants to do going forward. So by that logic, Alexa Bliss would be, maybe she's the one that, because she doesn't have any grudges going into this match or anything, maybe she's the one that somehow kind of comes out of this unscathed. Um, but I don't know, Alexa Bliss and Rhea, I just don't think that's it. But anyways, going through the rankings, I too had Naomi at 6. Just doesn't feel like she's the right person to put in a Mania championship match, and that's really, besides that and her holding a tag title. I'm gonna reverse that logic here in just a minute. But yeah, it just doesn't feel like Naomi is the right choice there. However, Jade comes back and whoever she goes up against obviously could completely change the dynamic here, for her or Bianca. But with that, I put Alexa at 5 simply because I don't see. I think it's too soon on her return to throw her in the main title picture, even though that's exactly what they did with Charlotte. But I think comparing Charlotte and Alexa is a little different. I think we at least agree to that. Um, and yeah, I think her character work is going to be the focus of going to Mania before we can readily decide who she's going to go up against. So that's kind of why I don't think it's Alexa's time. Um, and then I put Liv at 4. But man, you're convincing me that I'm wrong here. Maybe it's wishful thinking, but I just don't see her going against Rhea again. Just feels like that's too much. I know a lot of that is because Rhea was gone, and it felt like it was longer than it actually was and should have been. But I don't feel like going to be too many. There's going to be too many people behind that. And then at 3, I had Bailey. I think the question mark with um, Roxy is too big and looming, but also she's been here, she's done that. She could find a way to get over the up and coming NXT star. I think she could find a way through that. So I don't think that prevents her from winning as much as the other ones, quite as much. If Jade were to come in, obviously. And then at 2, I have Roxy. I could say that I'm going back and forth on my logic here, but it just feels like Roxy, in terms of coming up to the main roster and what she's already done just at the one pay-per-view at Royal Rumble, just feels like, especially if she's going to be a heel, what better way to prove it than coming in, making history of the Royal Rumble, and then winning your very first Elimination Chamber. I just feel like that would tie in perfectly to that heel persona, and and behind the prodigy, and proving that she belongs here, and then going up against Rhea Ripley. Just feels like that would be a statement and an all-time push. So I to that, it just feels like that story just kind of flows quite nicely from what we've seen already, with her on the main roster. And so, with that being said, I have Bianca at 1. I know I said something about the tag titles, but let's be honest, the tag titles haven't been super relevant. So I think that's a quick, they lose here. Maybe Liv and Raquel take it off of them. And then Bianca and Rhea, to me, just screams like the biggest main event out of these. Kind of your two of your biggest stars. I don't think you can argue that. And then I think just the big looming question mark is Jade. And it seems like what we've heard most is Naomi and Jade. That's going to be the angle they're going. And so if that's the case, then Bianca opens up to Rhea. They could certainly tie Rhea into that story as well. I think that would be quite interesting. But yeah, to me, it feels like Bianca is just the right winner here. Yeah, obviously they booked themselves into a corner with the tag titles and Jade. But to not be repetitive, it just feels like that one makes the most sense in terms of it belonging on a WrestleMania card. So, with that, let us know if you disagree or if you think we're missing something of the six women here. But without further ado, I think we'll go ahead and move on to the men's side. We'll basically continue the same style, go through each one alphabetically, discuss who we would have them go up against, and then at the end, kind of do similar rating 1 to 6, how likely and how unlikely they are to win the chamber. So, with that, we'll kick off with the always popular CM Punk. KP, who would you book CM Punk up against if he were to win the Elimination Chamber?
I would book CM Punk if he were to win the Elimination Chamber. I'd probably put him against Cody Rhodes. So obviously that is, very much doable, given the current circumstances in real life anyway. But yeah, I think the whole story just basically is set up for Cody and Punk, isn't it? Basically, it seems to be where they're heading. It seems to be the direction they hinted towards it before the Royal Rumble match. Obviously, he didn't win the Rumble in the end. So it seems like that still is on the cards, though, obviously him being in the matchup here in Elimination Chamber. So yeah, I think Punk and Cody makes most sense to me out of the other option. I think Punk and Gunter probably isn't something that I can see them doing just yet. I think Punk is quite brittle. Gunter's a lot more powerful than Cody Rhodes is. I think they probably want to be careful about that, maybe putting him against a big man for the time being. But yeah, I think Cody and Punk is where the direction is going. I think that's what they ideally want to be the case, and ultimately, I kind of agree with them. I think the match makes more sense. I think it probably fits better for Punk at this stage of his career, going up against Cody Rhodes rather than Gunter. So yeah, I would do the same thing. I'm not just basically basing it on what it seems to be the way they're going, but that is genuinely how I would do it as well. So I'm using that as sort of like a reference point here to go off of. But yeah, I agree. I think Punk and Cody seems to be the better move out of the two options. What about you though, Nick? Do you think the same thing as me?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. I think CM Punk his style and ring at this point in his career just wouldn't go well with Gunther. I feel like it would very much bring Gunther down. And obviously we are not the biggest fans of CM Punk, and that's I think being shown here. But it wouldn't make Gunther look good. It'd make him look weak, I think. And yeah, I just think CM Punk versus Cody Rhodes being both from AEW and that whole thing, I think that story kind of writes itself. And the promos would be interesting, and I think kind of who they would who everyone would end up siding with would be interesting. I think the face versus face dynamic would also be interesting. I think they can both CM Punk especially can show edge, and so I think one of them would kind of have to. I think that could be the only potential issue with that matchup. But yeah, I think Cody Rhodes is the clear, obvious choice on this one. Moving on to Damian Priest.
Damian Priest, I think that based on the fact that he's literally just come from Monday Night Raw, he's had matches with Gunter in the past, for the World Heavyweight Championship. I think it just makes sense for me to go something different and Damian Priest to go up against Cody Rhodes if he were to win the Elimination Chamber. I'm struggling to think if we've seen that match before. I don't think we have, as far as I'm concerned. So yeah, I think Cody up against Damian, it seems to be the better idea for me too personally as well. So if it is something we haven't seen before, then obviously fits that bill. That's perfect at the box. And yeah, off the back of the whole Gunter stuff, let's move on to something a little bit different. So Priest, if he wins up against Cody Rhodes, he goes as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, that's how I would go about it. What about you, Nick? You think the same?
Yeah, I think it's going to be obvious who we think is least likely to win based on this conversation so far. Yeah, I guess just to do something fresh because we've seen the Gunther Damian Priest matchup too much too recently, similar to Liv and Rhea. But to at least Liv and Rhea had a story, you know. Damien and Gunther just really didn't, outside of calling each other trash and growing up in certain ways. It just kind of felt forced. So yeah, Damian Priest up against Cody. You again run into the face dynamic with that matchup. Um, but I think yeah, I guess that's the better option just because we haven't seen it. And so similar to you, that's my logic there. So moving on to Drew McIntyre, arguably has just the most momentum here. Who do you put Drew McIntyre up against? I don't think there's a bad choice here, but who would you rather see?
Ultimately, I don't think there's a bad option here. I think Drew and Cody, writes itself. I think Drew and Gunter, we've seen them brawl over in the over the IC title in the past, back when Gunter had that legendary run. So I think, yeah, there isn't a match that I wouldn't want to see here between Drew and the current champions. I personally, when having to think about it, went with Cody Rhodes here, purely for the fact that I think if I could see Drew going on to WrestleMania and, challenging for a championship, who would I rather see Drew McIntyre beat in this point? Obviously, being a massive Drew McIntyre fan myself, I would choose Cody Rhodes. So I think Drew, defeating Cody, taking the title from him, I think would be massive for himself and his career right now. Would be some flowers that I think he's very, very much deserving of. And yeah, I would love to see that happen. I think that'd be fantastic. So that's how I would book Drew McIntyre personally. But not taking anything away from a possible match between Drew and Gunter again, because yeah, those have hit pretty hard in the past and they've been great every time as well. So yeah, I think just at this moment, the right time, the time for the moment, the right choice is Drew and Cody. What about you, Nick? Do you think the same thing, or are you maybe down the other line?
Yeah, I do agree with you here too as well. I think Drew and Cody would be all time in terms of character work built leading up to WrestleMania. I feel like that would give us almost like a Cody Roman level of face and heel dynamic. So that would be really interesting. And I think you can tell just by me talking about that match. It's definitely up on my list in terms of what I would want to see. But yeah, no disrespect towards Gunther whatsoever. And I think the promo and character work between them two could be quite interesting as well. And the match obviously would be very hard hitting. Um, it it just doesn't quite live up to what potentially Cody and Drew McIntyre could be. So with that, moving on, John Cena's last Elimination Chamber. He comes out victorious and has his choice of champions at WrestleMania. Who are you booking him up against?
Cena's an exciting prospect, someone that I would love to see win the Elimination Chamber here, and would have no complaints over if he did. Cena up against Gunter sounds really good to me in terms of a possible prospect for WrestleMania. But I think right now, I think Cena and Cody Rhodes, that's a match that I wouldn't want to miss. I wouldn't want to miss the other one. It's hard to separate the two options here because they're both fantastic, really, if you think about it. But I think right now, uh, if I'm booking Cena at WrestleMania, his last WrestleMania, he comes off the back of Elimination Chamber win. I don't care. I'm having him win the big one. I'm having him defeat whoever he goes up against. So personally, right now, I don't think Gunter needs to lose the championship. But I don't think Cody needs to lose it, but I would like him to. That's a personal preference of my own. And Cody losing to Cena would just be the cherry on the top for me personally. So yeah, I would go Cody Rhodes for John Cena purely to dethrone him, win number 17, and to do it by defeating, one of the guys who's literally on top of their game right now. So yeah, fine by me. That's what I would do. That would be my way of booking John Cena as the winner of the Elimination Chamber, going on to defeat Cody Rhodes at WrestleMania. What about you, Nick? Can you steer your temptation away from Cena and Gunter, like me, or are you maybe going down there?
Yeah, it just his last Mania, and I think this might play a part into kind of how Gunther's been booked. Not obviously super strong up until the um, Jay challenging him. It just feels like he's kind of taken the back seat to Cody's. Not quite as prevalent. And I think you have just two different styles of champions. You have the workhorse And not to say that Cody isn't, but his matches aren't quite as intense as Gunther's. I feel like I can safely say that in terms of hard hitting. So based on that logic, it just feels like a Mania match, Cena versus Cody.
Ribbit.
You know, the
Moo.
ultimate
Moo.
babyface
Moo.
and
Yeehaw.
John Cena, and always being pushed, arguably over pushed. And then you have Cody Rhodes, the
Oh.
one who
Oh.
was deemed not a good fit for WWE, goes off to AEW, comes back to WWE. I think that story in itself, I personally believe would argue, probably the most intriguing in terms of a Mania and a build-up. I think Cena versus Rhodes has the most intrigue to me personally. Just slightly getting the edge over McIntyre. It just feels like the story is much longer in terms of storytelling, and how far we could go back for those two. So I think that's quite intriguing. Um, so with that, moving on to Logan Paul, I think probably the most controversial figure, even getting the edge over CM Punk in my eyes. If he were to win, and you know, I'm curious to see if you've kind of seen and heard the same. But Logan Paul has gotten a ton of attention, at least from what I've seen online. Um, a lot of chatter about him winning this Mania match. Are we going to see it? Are we going to see Logan win this? And if so, who would you book him against?
Hell no. No way is he winning this Elimination Chamber match. Not a chance. Yeah, I don't see that as a possibility whatsoever. We'll get a little bit more into the likelihood a little bit later on. But let's say by some, absolute miracle, maybe the other 5 men collapse in the ring and, they all get called off for not being able to compete or whatever. Logan Paul wins the Elimination Chamber. He gets a choice of champions. I would book him to go up against Gunter, so he could get absolutely destroyed by the big guy. In all seriousness, though, no, I would genuinely do that. I don't think that we need to have Logan Paul against Cody Rhodes. It's not something that really appeals to me that much. But Logan Paul going up against Gunter, I just feel like it would be funny to watch. Like, you got Gunter, who's obviously this very proud, aggressive man, very on top of his game. I feel like if he was to go up against Logan Paul, I feel like he just looked down on him the whole time. Be quite the comical situation. Logan, he'd have to sort of like adjust his game a little bit to try and combat the style of Gunter. But I feel like it maybe we'd be able to see a bit more of Logan Paul's game. We would like to see another slight change to what he can do. So I think for that purpose, get a little bit of depth into his game. I genuinely would do this. I think it'd be much better to see him try and adapt to that. And if not, oh well, he gets put in the dirt, and it's a great win for Gunter. But yeah, I don't see any downsides to him going 1-on-1 win Gunter. But someone like Cody Rhodes, I don't know. It just doesn't excite me. Not Logan Paul and Cody anyway. A match with Cody isn't a bad thing, but it's just not something that I would personally be interested in. What about you, Nick, though? What are your thoughts on a possible Logan Paul win and going on to face either Gunter or Cody?
Yeah, clearly a match with Cody is not a bad thing. I think this is the first person that we've even considered, going up against Gunther. So I think Cody is the clear option, and with the exception of this one, just because I don't feel like that story does much. I feel like in terms of what Logan's character is, he's a social media star. He didn't even want to be here. He just ended up here, and now he's so good that WWE can't let go of him. And so I feel like that kind of story, I guess, could maybe tie in a little bit to how hard and how much Cody wants it, and how hard he had to work. I guess you could make that dynamic a little bit, but it just kind of feels like Logan just isn't worthy of being on Cody's level in terms of a star match at WrestleMania. So I think that's the biggest part that goes into that. I think you could kind of play a similar story with Gunther and him, how serious his character takes this business. And so I think that dynamic would work a little better with him. And then I think that the dynamic in their styles of matches the style of their in-ring persona, I think would work quite well off of one another. I think you could. I think Logan can have a good match with most, and so I think he could definitely have one with Cody as well. But Gunther just feels like it would make more sense in ring. So with that, last but not least, Seth Rollins.
I'd book him one-on-one with Gunter. I think that there's been a lot of history in the past between Seth and Cody. They've, more recently come out on the side of like being allies and whatnot. Obviously, going back to last year where they tag teamed at WrestleMania to go up against The Rock and Roman, and obviously Seth came out to help Cody win that match, ultimately being the deciding factor in the end with Roman Reigns. I feel that if Seth was to win this Elimination Chamber match somehow, then him going one-on-one with Gunter would probably be the only real option for me personally. Nothing against a match with Cody, but I feel like at this point it would be the right call to go with a Gunter and Seth Rollins matchup. And, I think that'd be a tremendous one as well. I don't think they've ever had a one-on-one match between the two of them before, so it would be a brand new thing, which would be amazing. First time matchup at WrestleMania, big stage for a championship, awesome. So yeah, ticks all boxes really. So yeah, that's what I would do personally with Seth freaking Rollins if he were to win this contest. What about you though? Would you like to see another attempt for Seth Rollins to defeat Cody Rhodes? Obviously, he went 0-3 against him a few years ago. So yeah, what do you reckon about that one then? Would you go Gunter or would you go Cody?
Yeah, I think this also plays into I want to see a fresh matchup. I think this kind of plays into that hand. And as you mentioned, would kind of negate some story they've told before with Seth and Cody. So I think Seth and Gunther makes more sense here. Obviously, their in-ring match would be great. I think their promos would write himself. They're both, I think, would work well off one another from a promo standpoint as well. And yeah, I think if this were to happen, I would have Gunther defeat Seth. I know we haven't really gone too much into that, but I think that would help solidify and elevate his current run. So with that, I think we can all agree that Gunther being chosen by Jay was the correct option because most of these matchups seem to favor Cody, or at least have more upside than down when roles are reversed. So with that, KP, give us your rankings from 1 to 6. Who is least likely to have their hand raised at the end of Elimination Chamber, and who is most likely? 6 being least, 1 being the most.
Well, I can guarantee, based on conversations that we've had already, that you will not see my number 6 choice coming right here, right now. I put at number 6, the least likely to win this Elimination Chamber match, I put Seth Rollins. I don't think he has a chance in hell to win this contest. I really do not. I think that there's too much going on right now with Seth Rollins outside of this one. Roman Reigns, specifically speaking. I think that he's not going to let what Seth did to him at the Royal Rumble. I don't think he's not going to let that go, is he? He's not going to let it slide. So yeah, I don't think he stands an absolute chance at all of winning this contest. So I think he'll get screwed by Roman, and yeah, he will not win. So I think there are 5 other guys in this match that are more likely to win than Seth Rollins. Not like, I don't think it's so much like I don't think that he won't outlast anybody. I think he probably will outlast a couple of these guys as a minimum. But yeah, when it comes down to actually like your chances of winning, I don't think there's a remote chance he'll win. So yeah, maybe a little controversial, but yeah, he's my least likely. Number 5 is the man that I think you've put at number 6, and that is Damian Priest. I don't see this happening. He's obviously been in a big picture recently on Monday Night Raw. Obviously he lost his title back at SummerSlam and stuff, but I think he's always been in that conversation. He's always been in the mix sort of thing. Maybe like the odd little bit with Finn Balor and whatnot, but besides that, he's been around the same situation quite consistently. And he actually had a match with Gunter, somewhat recently as well. So yeah, I don't think that him winning is overly likely either. I think there are names in here that are a lot more likely to do so. One of which I think is Logan Paul. I put him at number 4 in this one. I don't think he's really likely to win the Elimination Chamber, but I think just because of the other 2 men that I've already mentioned, I think he's probably got a little bit more likelihood to get that job done. But I don't think he will. No, not too sure about that one. Then that leaves three. This was quite difficult for me personally because I think all three of these guys have a very, very big realistic chance of winning this chamber match. After much deliberation, I went with number 3 being Drew McIntyre. He's my number one choice if I could choose either of these men to win, any of these men to win this one, I would choose Drew McIntyre. But I just think, personally speaking, likelihood wise, I think that he's probably number 3 because I can't help but think that one of the other two will win, and that's a tough call as it is as well. But yeah, Drew McIntyre third for me personally, even though I really would like it to happen. Number 2, yeah, this was a bit of a and an ah, but I went with John Cena for the second most likelihood in this contest, purely for the fact that I feel like they're gonna try and tease us. So they had it with the Royal Rumble. They had him come runner up to Jey Uso. I know, terrible. I agree. But when it comes to the Elimination Chamber, I think they could do something very similar. I think they maybe could have him get a close call over, I guess in my case, CM Punk. And then Punk somehow finds a way to get the job done, and ultimately crushes John Cena's chance to go to WrestleMania in that sort of spotlight. So I think, personally speaking, that CM Punk is probably my most likely option to win, because it just makes sense. It seems to be what they're doing. Punk against Cody seems to be written in the stars almost, and I think that's probably the most likely option to happen from this one. What about you, Nick? Has that turned your attention a little bit there? Some surprising calls, perhaps, maybe putting Seth at number 6? I don't think you probably expected that one, but what's your list? Well, let's see what you've got to say.
Yeah, so compared to the women's, I felt like the women's was not an obvious winner. And based on our difference in rankings here, maybe the men's isn't either. Or maybe we just one of us is completely wrong and one of us is exactly right. At 6, you are correct. I did have Damian Priest. I want to say it has nothing to do with just my fandom for him, but I think it kind of does. Just kind of feels like he's in a weird spot right now. He's no longer with the Judgment Day, and good for him. I think we would both say, but just doesn't feel like he has that main event it factor, which compared to the other 5, I would say they do. I feel like I wouldn't be surprised to see the other 5 in in a title match at Mania. Maybe the one exception, maybe the one other exception being Logan Paul. I don't think he would be ready, but also I think he would do better than in that position than Damian. So not much else really to say outside of that. My number 5 is quite different from yours, and that is CM Punk. But the reasonings behind that is similar to the reasons that you put Rollins at 6. I think the elephant in the room is, Seth Rollins and Roman Reigns. I think if Roman Reigns were to come in here and, seek revenge or whatever, I feel like Punk and Rollins could both eventually be victim to that. And the only way I could see Punk winning is if he were to be the last one enter. I think that plays a part too. I think we've seen, in the past, he has trouble keeping up these days. And so unless he's the last person to enter, I don't see him like running through, even if he's middle of the pack or obviously the first one. I just don't feel like he has it in him to go the distance. And I feel like CM Punk, it doesn't need a title, and you could say that about others here too. But I feel like him more than anyone else, maybe arguably John Cena, he just doesn't need a title at Mania. He doesn't need to be involved in a title match at Mania. Whatever the thing is going on with Seth and Roman, I feel like that would kind of write itself. And yeah, I don't know. I just don't feel like it's in the cards, in my opinion. So moving on, and for similar reasons, I put Rollins at 4. Rollins at least has the stamina to go the distance, even if he is at 1, coming in a 1 or 2. I feel like he would be, obviously he has the ability to do that. So, but yeah, for the same reasons, I feel like if Roman is going to come into play here, I think both of those could be affected. And again, we've seen Seth, we've seen Cody too much. And so I think for those reasons, it just doesn't make sense. Um, Three, I have Logan Paul, so just slightly above yours. I don't want him to be there, but I think he has the ability to do it. And same reasons for Seth. I feel like he has the stamina to go the distance, even if he is to come in at one or two. Um, but yeah, we none of us like him as a person, but can't deny what he does in ring and his ability to make the audience hate him. He certainly has that. And so that going up against Cody would be, I mean, can't deny it would be a story. So then two, I have John Cena as well. I agree with your points in making the chase and kind of the sad kind of. It's interesting that this at this point in his career we finally reached that with him, where we finally want him to win. And all the other title defenses we didn't want him to win, or title opportunities, excuse me. Nobody wanted him to win for the most part, especially at the first few. Um, but yeah, it's interesting that's the point in his career that we've currently arrived to. I agree. I think the chase and him just wanting it, I think, is a better story than him winning here and getting Cody Rhodes. The story with Cody Rhodes is very intriguing to me. Um, but yeah, I think just the chase and him wanting that title and having the whole year to do it and not just Mania. I think that's the key point here. He can get it after Mania with no problem. So I love the idea of it. I just feel like the number one makes more sense. And of course, that is by process of elimination, Drew McIntyre. I don't know if it's my fandom coming into play here. The opposite side of Damian Priest. I just feel like he deserves it. He's gone through so much shit. He just, as you mentioned earlier, I think he deserves his flowers. Um, and I think the matchup with him, just absolute heel versus an absolute baby face and Cody Rhodes, just feels like the biggest Mania option. Um, yeah, so that's my final answer. I think Drew is the best choice and in my opinion the most likely. So with that, it feels like we can agree that WWE made the right choice. I feel like we overwhelmingly went for the champion that doesn't yet have a competitor. And so maybe that's just our logic coming into play, or maybe we actually do agree that WWE has made the right choice here. Um, but yeah, so we'll see if in between now and next week when we do our actual predictions for Elimination Chamber, if we have any change of heart, change of mind, and we'll go from there. But this was our first attempt at doing something a little outside of the box. In terms of not just doing a recap or a prediction or reaction, this was getting a little more in depth. So if you did like this video, be sure to let us know and we'll continue to put out more content like this. KP, do you have anything else to add here?
I don't think I do, to be honest. I think that was a pretty solid, in-depth description of all the likelihoods and basically just what we think, would be a nice little bit of fun fantasy booking. And ultimately, I am really looking forward to the Elimination Chamber. So just gets a little bit of the blood flowing. There's sort of the anticipation rising, and yeah, I'm looking forward to it. It should be a lot of fun. So yeah, no, I'm good. I'm happy, and I think I've got everything out that I would like to say and add to this one.
Yeah, but that's exactly what we wanted to do, right? We wanted to try something new to kind of help bridge the gap between Vengeance Day and Elimination Chamber. But with that being said, we'll be back in exactly a week's time to cast our official predictions. Whether they be any different, we will find out. But yeah, once we get that official card and it becomes a little more clear if we are going to get any more matches for Elimination Chamber, we will work on that and we will see you on our next video for the SmackDown recap over the weekend. So with that, this has been The Push with Nick and KP, and we will see you next time.